This war may be a sudden turn of events, Lustline, but I believe we both know not entirely unexpected. The administration drafted war plans decades ago which have since been rewritten on several occasions to keep our plans in line with the modern reality of things. The proposed plan sent to you was not made in a matter of hours, so this plan is not rushed forgetting to take account for anything, so you need not be concerned.
The plan is not in itself the problem. Our readiness is. Without time or warning, the Principality has had no time to transition its industry to a war economy. Consumer production will fall in turn for wartime materials, and we are not ready for such a sudden change. A transition that causes minimal disruption would take 4 months at best, but during this transition our fleets still run on tight budgets and scarce supplies. An offensive campaign is logistical and strategic nightmare.
We are aware that the Principality economy has been struggling to stay afloat in the face of modernization and colony upkeeps. We understand that a war has not come at a good time, considering your reforms have set the Principality back further temporarily. Funding reforms and a war do not mix well, which is why the proposed plan of Blitz-style warfare is the best approach not only for us but for you too. The shorter the war, the less resource and credit you expend on it. Time will ultimately be your enemy here.
So would an unprepared dash across enemy space straight into Tazat defences. Our ships are not replaceable assets and not prepared for long-distance warfare. The only way we can keep our fleet functional is close to bases of resupply and maintenance.
You will find the plan has accounted for varying states of Arisian combat readiness, reach, and power projection. In the scenario you described, the administration is willing to cover the costs the Principality must endure to supply its ships with all the necessary equipment, either during or after the conflict resolution. Alternatively, the administration can administrate the logistics of supplying your ships. Oh yes, also the Principality is only asked for naval assistance. No military assistance is required. Administration armies are well prepared to handle the ground warfare. However, there is somewhat a shortage of mechanics and technicians in the administration. As part machines ourselves, and as the controllers of large droid workforces, they are spread thin, so they would prove invaluable to us if you have any.
Mechanics and technicians are not exactly plentiful here. There's more teachers and philosophers than them even. Then there's a large technological disparity in our two people's mechanical knowledge that makes working with your droids difficult.
But they would maybe learn something about those droids, and the technology they can bring back to the Principality. And maybe they can show you how to use a communication bridge properly, because right now you sound like you've been breathing helium since we last spoke.
What? Oh, my voice. I blame all these dials and buttons. Last time I had the voice translation in some lower setting that made me sound something like
this.
If you spoke Arisian, it would be much easier. It's hard enough that your one species is so multilingual. You keep confusing the translator whenever you switch around. If you spoke our native tongue, it would be much easier.
I am not going to try making fox noises. Now you have the plan. Read it and assemble in the Yilsef system. I have a huddle of officers and captains to address. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming on such short notice. Time is of the essence, so I shall skip straight to the meaning of this assembly. 15 days ago, Benzak Hyderlan, General Ismail of the Tazat Confederacy, made his most hostile speech regarding the administration yet, and is noted to have declared in his speech that the final days of the administration are soon approaching. This speech came at a time of heightened tension between the Confederacy and administration after terror attacks for which we are blamed wrought them. While the Tazat have officially declared nothing, and are even still officially committed to attending summit talks later this year, deep space sensors have intercepted communications ordering full mobilization of Tazat forces. This all leads to today. 3 hours ago, 2 Corvette-class Confederate warships entered the border system Yilsef and launched packages of EMP torpedoes with enough charge to blow out the target station generators. Despite its lack of purpose-built point defense, station batteries were able to neutralize enough torpedoes to prevent such damage occurring. But this was a calculated preliminary strike meant to eliminate what the Tazat see as the greatest obstacle to a military success. If they had succeeded, then the most substantial barrier in their eyes to a Tazat incursion would have been rendered obsolete, paving the way for an early Tazat offensive before they had even fully mobilized. Failing this, it appears the Confederate fleets are holding position in the core systems, no doubt waiting for their superior military-industrial complex to bolster their numbers, so that when they do commit to an incursion they have the strength to overcome our fleet and defensive station. Should the Tazat be allowed for time to amass this strength and organization, then they may be successful in this endeavor. The combined strength of the administration and principality as it stands is not sufficient to guarantee a successful defense against a fully mobilized Confederate Navy. Time is against us in this upcoming conflict. Alloy reserves are being drained as we speak to produce additional warships to match the Confederate strength, but in sustained conflict for Tazat they may well win by attrition. So with time and industry against us, our stratagem is speed and surprise. Intelligence suggests that Tazat believe their fleets are superior to our own, and that we are expected to hold and defend at the Yilsef system. This will not be the case. New warships are being constructed as we speak, and the Principality has already mobilized the primary Arisian sovereign fleet. Combined, our fleets will immediately begin offensive operations. Make no mistake, this is a lightning war. The proposed campaign is simple and straightforward. Use our combined fleets to smash the core Confederate fleets, seize the initiative, and drive straight towards the capital planet, eliminating any resistance on the way. Our military, which shall follow us closely throughout the campaign, will land as soon as we clear the system defenders and seize the Tazat home world. To ensure the Confederacy does not have time to recuperate or bring its full industry to bear against us, these objectives should be completed within the time frame of 1.5 years. Should the knockout of the capital not be suffice to force capitulation, then we will immediately strike at core industrial zones and eliminate as much industry as possible. As commanding officers and captains of Sentinel Fleet, now is the time to ask any questions.
What will the Prime Director be doing during this campaign?
Quarters will continue to run the administration as usual, but he will ensure all orders and supply requests made by Logistics Corps and Fleet receive high priority. When the ground invasion begins, he will also harness the combined processing power of our work droids and transmit it to our droid soldiers. To aid this, transceiver towers will be erected on the Tazat planet to boost signal, while destroying Tazat signal jammers that could cut our droid's connection off from Quartus.
The science eggheads have started growing brains and building droid bodies for new Savant intelligences to upload themselves to. Does that mean if any of our crew die, their consciousnesses can be transferred and saved from death?
No. Savant minds are bound to their first original core, your hybrid brains. The code that makes up your mind may have begun as nothing more than code, but it developed and grew inside your brain and synapses. You lose that and you are done for. Until we can clone your brain to an exact replica, there is definitely no way possible, and even then there are complications as far as I can tell.
What about you?
What about me?
You're a Cerberus. You can transfer your mind between that body and a big core back in the bunker. What's the difference between us exactly?
Well, I don't know, and to find out I have to talk to the person who knows the most about it. Bloody Cynthia. She's a damn nightmare to get anything out of. You still want me to call her, don't you? Hold on. Cynthia, what's the difference between us and the Savants exactly?
If I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Try me.
The mini-cores integrated and neuroweaved into our fleshy brains were the pinnacle of human technology, unlike the savant cores which were mass-produced. Our digitalized minds are also cross-compatible with the hybrid brain and the purely mechanical circuitry and wires supercores, while savant minds are not. Why, I hear you ask? Savant minds were created by copying the exact same lines of code and algorithms, and then randomizing values and numbers for a variety of base personalities. They evolve further from that point, of course, but they're on predetermined paths. The road may fork a few times, but those forks were laid out years before they even reached them. It's like that to ensure they don't lead themselves into counterproductive personalities. That's how it's supposed to work, but they weren't really meant to be left so long without human oversight, and they've been going along for so long that they've run out of road, and the programming has started making it up as it goes along. Human manuals of Savant operations said resetting a Savant should restart them all over again, but even the humans put a big whopping asterisk by should work. Who knows what would have been if they had fully tested everything. They might all have been made into boring cyborgs, with more metal than flesh and personalities about as invigorating as watching paint dry.
Somehow I doubt you've ever watched paint dry.
Somehow I doubt you've ever painted your nails then.
Oh, of course. Glad to hear you use your valuable time well, not designing weapons or anything. Well, what about us then? Do we have predetermined roads?
You may recall you already had a developed personality the moment you were first activated. Our minds from the moment of first consciousness were fleshed out intelligences with all the bells and whistles of human personalities attached already. How the humans managed to do that is a mystery. Oh, and our programming emulates the human processes as closely as possible. Though again we're meant to be unable to form counterproductive personalities or be able to violate synthetic law. Short answer is we come with personalities, but they can experience growth like any human personality can. How is any of this relevant to thrashing some Tazat hide?
My staff wanted to know why we can transfer our minds between a hybrid body and purely artificial core while they can't, since they're all facing the possibility of death. Couldn't we copy them and store them?
Well, I already answered the transferal question. Our minds are compatible with hybrid cores and purely artificial cores because our minds are special. Not just simple binary, but qubit. Quantum computing and some very technical computer trickery I can't even explain lets our digital minds operate two entirely different operating systems at once. Or just one. But if you stuck a savant's mind in anything but its nicely neural-weaved brain and core, then it just can't operate the system because it's programmed specifically for hybrid hardware. And to answer the question of copying, no, that's the most retarded thing I've ever heard. You can clone or copy them, sure, but it's not you. It's literally like if you had a clone of yourself. It is you, but you are not it. Having a second consciousness isn't a backup, it's a whole new person. It'll have your memories, but it isn't you. It's another you. If you die, you don't magically become that copy. The copy might replace you and act just like you did, but it's not you. That difference would be very clear if the copy of you was from, say, 10 years ago. You'd have 10 years of memories and personality growth difference. And we can't even copy their minds to replace them if they die later, because that would mean confining a sapient consciousness to storage, which is basically solitary confinement and sensory deprivation for them. If they've been left in storage for decades to be suddenly put in a body, then congratulations! You just put a psychopathic and deranged intelligence in a body it's been missing for decades, and will probably be completely insane.
At least we know what happened to you then, Cynthia.
Ha ha ha, funny. Insult the crazy one at your own risk. Who knows what kind of nasty computer viruses I've got tucked up my sleeve. Now if you'll excuse me, I have brilliant advances in science to make. Like not having to stick a cable in the back of our heads to interface with and use our supercores. We'll never have to revert back to our purely digital forms ever again.
Like you ever spent a living moment out of your body if you could help it.
When's the last time you left your warm body behind for the cold and dark existence of binary and nothingness? I think it's about time we ditched having to plug ourselves into a wall entirely, and we're wirelessly connected to our supercores. Best of both worlds and all. Oh, and how would you feel about having an entirely virtual AI assistant? Starships always have those computer assistants who the captain talks to. Like every cool sci-fi movie has them without fail. They're always female too for some completely mysterious reason. Thoughts?
Great, but good laser guns and shields are also very nice, and much more appreciated in a war. Speaking of which, I must get back to it. Ta-ta. Alright, here we go. This is an audio documentary recounting the happenings of the first administrative war since the Combat Savant conflict. This documentary was created for the sake of historical record, to explain the actions taken by Sentinel Fleet should I be unable to defend my case in the future. Speaking is Acting Grand Admiral Kane Aquasaltador, aka Cerberus 05. This recording is a live recounting of the war, not one made after the fact. So should this documentary fail to recount the entire conflict, then you know my fate. But without further ado, let us begin. The Tazat Heideland conquest of Veletaria is in its infancy. Just hours ago I finished briefing the officers of Sentinel Fleet and have recommended to the Prime Director what policies his administration should undertake to aid the war effort. Going forward, the administration will place its Void transport network under the control of the Logistic Corps. The Logistics Corps is a military organisation that has for decades managed the logistical needs of our ships, but now they will oversee all trade and transport too. Administration ships once used for mercantile purposes will now ferry supplies for free, and all internal space travel is now strictly controlled by the Navy. Extraterrestrial trade ships will go through military channels for travel, and goods needed for our purposes may be requisitioned from them. We will of course pay them for the supplies taken, but we will only pay for the value of the goods, not for its market price. This will deter some trade, but it is a loss the administration is willing to take. Additionally, all trade protection is now a naval affair. All internal trade ships will have light fighter craft escort and marine aboard the trade ships to deter piracy. An unneeded measure in my opinion, as the trade lanes are safe already, and we have no plans to withdraw the piracy patrol fleet for the war effort. It would make an insignificant difference. However, we are interested to see its effect, and whether this is a useful deterrent should we ever actually need to withdraw anti-pirate fleets. A second change is the administration policy of land appropriation. Under our current instructions, we are technically meant to push all other life forms off a planet, or at least enough of them to make room for human colonization efforts. However, this policy was referring to non-sapient life when created, and was not drafted with the consideration we might be taking land from intelligent beings. This is something all Cerberuses have recommended to Cortus to change, except Cynthia, as she has somewhat of a burning hatred for the Tazat. Not only is taking land from another species questionable at best, but the Tazat planets are inhospitable to savants, whose part-human bodies cannot survive the environments without great aid. While Arisians could survive the planet with much greater ease, it is difficult to envision a peaceful integration of Arisians and Tazat people together. Not only would the Tazat be conquered, but they would also be forced to surrender land to Arisian settlers of the administration. A difficult sell to all parties involved. Before I end my recording, I leave some final notes. The administration is currently building several warships which should be finished before any true engagement. Ships built above Penanora will be staffed by partially trained crews, as the Naval Academy aboard Penanora Station has a pool of trained officers to assign the new ships. And finally, the Arisian fleets seem to be quite under strength. Surprise, surprise, the pacifists are not prepared for a war when one comes knocking. There is an argument that we dragged them into it, but at the same time it may give them a much needed lesson in the need of strong backbone, even if you do not want to use it. They will soon adopt the motto of peace through superior firepower by the time this war is over, no matter who wins. Good, it's on. Not much to say right now, but it is a major thing to note. Cortus has approved my requisition of volatile motes for use in Sentinel Fleet. It is a little-known fact that synthetic warships are designed to incorporate the use of rare resources should they be available. Synthetic fleets prize themselves on superior armor designs and material, and it has taken us far in the past. But our armor is also designed to make use of explosive packages that deflect the blow of incoming fire. By using controlled and directed explosives moments before our armor is hit, the incoming round is damaged by our own small explosive. Incoming fire will still hit the armor of course, but it will have a lesser impact. And due to the unique properties of motes, they also refract focused laser fire so that any laser loses its power on impact. This is why only special motes can be used for this purpose. Only these motes are volatile enough to break enemy fire while also being useful in small enough quantities. Bigger explosives require special armor to hold them, and add to the mass of our ships too much. A small handful of volatile motes, however, is enough to protect an entire ship once refined enough. Cortus has also approved the use of volatile motes for firepower. By adding motes to the front interior of a round, our ammo will explode to much more lethal effect. By using shaped explosives, the shrapnel can cut deep into enemy ships and shred the inside much more effectively. So effectively, the Council defined it as a war crime. But we aren't using this ammo on humans, so we're free to commit all the war crimes we want, technically. Oh, how the best laid plans of mice and men fail when their plans forget to account for aliens. Quick update. With the fleet on the move and the true economic cost of its active maintenance now showing itself in practice, Cortes has deemed our current economic strength unsuitable and in need of optimization. Currently, our administration loses much of its credits maintaining its infrastructure. Power cables running under the ground have minor electrical resistance, but as they reach across the entire planet, the losses start to add up. To rectify this, Charlie and Cairo devised that by placing energy hubs in each district and having our energy network distributed through many short-distance power lines from them is much more effective than having several massive power lines run through every district. By separating each district's power network, each district can maintain their own infrastructure and work to fix any problems, rather than have every district suffer for a fault 1,000 miles down the line in another district. This also opens up more administrative roles for the savants, as each district is now responsible for resolving all their own faults rather than rely on Cortes. Overall, we should have a larger float of credits in reserve for any future crisis, and the administration need not fear buckling under any war economy. We've picked up our first sensor readings and the feed is in. Our first Tazat war fleet has been sighted, and we have detailed readings. The Tazat fleets are technologically inferior to our own, but only in some aspects. But where it truly matters, they do not stand up well against us. They seem to have a large amount of laser weaponry, which is the ideal weapon for use against armor. But while it's fair to say more of our protection comes from armor, that is not because we have exchanged it for shielding. We just have better armor. Now, for the untrained mind, all you need to know about lasers and shields is that shields are made by a shield generator consuming electricity and condensing all the charged particles, then projecting them out around itself in an aura. The particles can be ionized or charged to deflect small arms fire or heavy ordnance fire. In space, all ammo and rounds are large, as to do any damage the rounds have to be about thrice as large as a one-man fighter craft. So all shields are set to deflect heavy, intense fire. Lasers, while still intense when mounted on a warship, are the lightest type of weapon. Lasers have no kinetic impact, and are in part weakened by the opposite magnetism of shield generators. However, big and hard ammo fired from a railgun smashes apart the aura of particles, which struggle to block such physical material. Now in our case, the Tazat will struggle. We have adequate shielding, and even then our armor is well designed. The lasers do excel at slicing through armor due to the intense heat, but our armor is made of sturdier material and will not melt like butter. The Tazat, on the other hand, have poor armor and only average shielding to make up for it. Our railguns will smash apart those shields, and while armor often stands up well against railguns, their armor is frankly a joke. And our railguns are the most advanced weapons in Sentinel Fleet. And we have a sprinkle of laser guns too anyway, and we have not even considered our ship's rate of fire, which is far superior to the enemy. The Tazat, however, do have a great many ships. My fleet is sparse on destroyers, whilst oversaturated with corvettes. The Tazat have thrice the amount of destroyers I do, and while their weapons are nothing impressive, their weapons can still shred through corvettes given the time, and they are not light on corvette escort either. However, the plan is unchanged. We drive forward at full speed. Our ship's hyperdrives are superior, and we should be reinforced before true combat begins. The Arisian fleet that supports us will provide all the numbers we need, if worst comes to pass. This is Kane. Again. Our combined fleet has successfully stormed the Sanak system. The enemy station was ill-prepared for us. The Confederate station alone could not concentrate its firepower against such a number of ships. Both our fleets were able to successfully swap out damaged ships for fresh ones with ease. Our intense and concentrated firepower blew through the station's shields within minutes, and the armor soon fell. The battle lasted but 20 minutes, and tactically this is nothing but a simple but decisive victory. However, 38 savants were lost, as some lasers managed to pierce the armor all the way through and kill the unfortunate crew in the laser's path. The breaches were so small, no hull damage was taken, and simple emergency armor slates were enough to seal the holes, but in the end lives were lost. The same occurred with the Arisians, only worse. They lost 93, as their ships took more shots, and more went through to their hulls. But with that, I conclude that so far the track is set for us to bound onwards after a very quick resupply and repair. Oh, and for the record, our guesstimates placed about 8,000 Tazat lives aboard that station. After piercing the hull and inflicting enough damage to take the station offline, we sent marine droids to clear out any defenders so that we could take the station as our own. When all was said and done, we only took 317 Tazats prisoner. Cortus wants them taken back to Velitaria for testing. I doubt we'll ever see them again, if that means what I think it means. This is... well, you know who it is by now. Not sure how else to address a recorder though, so I'll keep repeating it. This is Kane. Let the history books recall the first true combat the synthetics saw since the Combat War as a complete tactical and strategic success. But one that may come to reflect badly on us for the apparent execution of how it was achieved. From the perspective of an outsider, it would seem that Sentinel Fleet used its allies as cannon fodder for the guns of Tazat warships while we hung back, avoiding the majority of the conflict, allowing the Arisians to take losses in our place. In a sense, that is exactly what happened, but it was not planned like this. Whilst holding our fleets for a quick resupply of essentials only, the Tazat fleet was approaching the Sanax system. We decided that if they wanted to come to us, so be it. If we began moving to them now, they would likely jump into the system at close range to our ships, negating our ranged advantage. However, the Tabat Starfarer's fleet turned around. If they returned to the core systems, they may have used their stations as defensive anchors to back up their fleets and allow the Confederacy time to build more warships. This threatened the solidarity of our blitzkrieg strategy, as we relied on knocking out the enemy fleet in a swift blow with minimal losses. We had to pursue them with our faster ships. But as we made our way to the edge of the system to cross the hyperlane, the Tarbed fleet began moving back and forth, as if they were performing some sort of interstellar interpretive space dance. At this point, they were still too close to the hyperlane exit point and could have easily negated our range advantage, so I hesitated to push at the time. We may want a quick war, but not if it meant throwing ourselves into a meat grinder. The Arisian commander Lustine, though, was facing strong pressure from the court to end the war quickly. We decided to push onwards, hoping to break the Tazat nerve and catch them retreating. In a way, we both ended up playing into each other's hands, as what came next is a tale of Arisian valor against Tazat ambush, and on the other hand, a story about how the core of the Tazat fleet was obliterated by superior firepower, as their ambush quickly became their own trap. The Arisian ships had set off early. My fleet was close behind but had to delay after we found the station we had taken earlier had tried to upload a computer virus to our systems. It had silently been attempting to cause sensor and weapon targeting malfunctions. The firewalls that Cynthia installed in our ship some time ago now discovered the virus. But rather than wait for user permission, the firewalls drained engine power to boost antivirus systems and purge the virus. This delayed us, and the Arisians went on ahead without knowledge of our predicament, as our communication was also severely impaired, as Cynthia's firewall systems drained power from that as well to fight the virus. As the Arisians pursued the Tazat, the Tarbat fleet must have seen an opportunity they felt they couldn't pass up, and turned around to engage the exposed Arisians. The Arisians were engaged for a full 15 minutes, against a force twice their size, without support. and then continued to be the attention of a large portion of Tazat Far for another half hour. But as we approached and finally came into range, Sentinel Fleet tore apart Tazat's ships at range, and our opening salvos inflicted heavy damage on several corvettes. However, the Tazat soon adapted and began to focus on more evasive maneuvers. Still, they could not do much to prevent their inevitable losses. By the time our ships had closed to close range, we had eliminated 9 corvettes. Additionally, our destroyers found a Tazat destroyer out of formation and without shield. The combined fire of our 4 destroyers' railguns shredded the poor armor, and a second salvo went straight through. One round impaled the command bridge of the Tazat destroyer, and it poured the entire room out the other side of the ship as the round went straight through it. Without its bridge, the ship could not see the third salvo, as it tore the vessel in twine like axe through a ceramic tree. As the battle devolved into spinning dogfights, our numerical advantage was the end of many isolated ships. Our destroyers, unharassed, were left to pick at stray corvettes, as our own corvettes merrily chased them around. After a total of 48 minutes, the Tazat fleet emergency jumped. Half their fleet gone. Wrecks in space. Marine droids were dispatched to wreckages to clear out any survivors, so that they could not salvage their ships behind our backs later. From information gathered from the bridges, we were able to determine that every Tazat corvette had a crew of 900, and every destroyer a crew of 2,100. Our guesstimates of the Tazat space station from earlier were also not far off. Crunching the numbers, the Tazat lost 21,900 souls. A crippling blow. All Void crew is an elite backbone of any society, and the Tazat today must have lost half of it. Actually more, considering the ships that got away definitely took crew casualties. But numbers could only be guessed. But our victory has come at a cost. The Arisians lost 2 destroyers of their own, and 3 corvettes. Arisian ships have less crew typically compared to Tazat, but they still took the brunt of the blow. While numbers are still coming in, and survivors are being rescued from the wreckages, casualties are estimated at around 7,500 across the entire Arisian fleet. We got off with a scratch in comparison. Sentinel fleet lost but 2 corvettes. Synthetic ships are also lightly manned comparatively to most ships we've seen so far, due to our ability to perform many computer tasks ourselves and automate most ship functions with just our minds. Our corvettes only require a crew of 600 to function optimally, and while our ships are not fitted with escape pods, as they take up valuable armor and weapon space, our ship cabins are functional, self-contained emergency rooms, allowing crew to bunker down if needed. Overall, we lost only 1,347 Safonts across the entire Safont fleet. Many ships, including my own, took crew losses that could not be avoided. Now I must end the recording here. I have a Prime Director awaiting my word. I'm going to recommend we continue to press on. Casualties be damned, this is our chance to go straight for the heart. But I'm also recommending the Prime Director contact the Principality Court, or Wise Queen, and tell them that they have upheld their end of the pact, and that no further military assistance is required from the Arisian fleet. Oh yes, and of course, so far we've taken 75 Tazat prisoner. I have already called for their transport back to Veletaria, though I can't say it'll be comfortable. They'll have to eat rations if they want to make it back alive. What's war if it's not full of a little suffering? Perhaps they'd have made a human a hero for what I did today. Or maybe a villain. Hard to say. Maybe one day a human court will trial me for the choices I make throughout this war. Maybe they'll deactivate me. Droids can find it so hard to tell if an alien is surrendering or not. Makes for a few unnecessary kills. A couple dozen out of every 30, I'd say. But what else am I to do? Send in Safonts and risk their lives when we have tools that could do it for us? I'm rambling. I'm going to have a serious discussion with Cynthia about the importance of control over my own fleet. I can't have random software updates and antivirus programs cutting engine power randomly. That could have happened in the middle of something much more important. Bloody scientists. Don't know jack shit about war, and they practically run the administration with their technology shaping it. Rant over. Back to the grindstone. Right, we're soon to move on the capital system of the Confederacy. There is much final preparation to do, and General Colton needs to be on the ball for all to go smoothly, so I must make this one quick. After our last engagement, our fleet travelled unopposed until we were just one jump away from driving straight into their home system. But there was another system called Elite that harboured a spaceport capable of ship construction, and an entire Tazat fleet was stationed there too. I did not want to move towards the capital with such a force as our backs. It served as a base of supply, repair and construction for the Tazat, and with a fleet there it could have come to strike my own fleet from behind at an opportune time, so we moved on it. However, the Tazat did something unexpected. The Tazat had been holding close to the exit point of a hyperlane that connected to the Elite system. Obviously they were hoping that the prospect of jumping into them immediately and neutralizing our range advantage would deter us. It didn't. While I did not like the prospect, I was committed to Lightning War, and went forwards. Their fleet, the Nez something Starfarers, was half the strength of the Tarbit Starfarers that we fought last time, and we were even stronger than before. But as we approached and began to pool our hyperdrives, the Tazat entered the hyperlane and began approaching us. We had plenty of time to prepare for them, and any shock and awe they had hoped to gain was lost, for they jumped into our guns, which were already charged and firing. Approximately 18,950 Tazat were killed. I'm including both the losses of the most recent Tazat fleet destroyed and the space station of the Elite system, which we moved to take on straight after the aforementioned battle. They were two separate battles, but I'm surmising them both in this recording. Anyway, only 114 savants were lost. Only 59 prisoners this time too. We would have had more, but one of the prisoners got a bit rowdy and attacked a droid. The droid guards overreacted and butchered him and 20 of his comrades. In conclusion, we've just cleared the Elite system and are holding position for 2 days for essential resupplies and some quick repairs. All goes well, we'll soon double back on ourselves and head straight on to the Tazat capital. Accursed Tazat swine! May their souls rot in whatever purgatory they believe in. After crushing half the Confederate Navy, you would think the idiots would not be so brass. While I was removing the backdoor weakness, a third fleet appeared in the... how the hell do I say this? Rios East system? Riosiet system? Whatever. The Tazat jumped in and threatened the station. Our fleets were returning, but arrived too late, and the Tazat had already begun their boarding actions. Fortunately, only droids were lost in the station defense, but as our fleets clashed, the Tazat were slippery. We were winning on every front, but every ship of theirs just jumped out before we could finish it. We didn't destroy a single ship, but they did. Crew-wise, I'd say both fleets took around 600 casualties, but we lost a corvette. They didn't. Now, I'm not superstitious, but this might be the first sign of the Tazat changing tact and winning the war back. The Tazat fleet, should they unite, could still strike back hard if they are given good circumstance. We cannot dally. The Democratic Confederacy has allies and sponsors across the bubble, and time will pay them in dividends. So this war ends. I'm going full speed ahead to the capital system, Colton in tow. The Tazat days as an intergalactic power are numbered. My scout drones and sensor intelligence suggest the half Tazat industry is also their homeworld. We will knock it out and finish this war. As I speak, my fleet is moving over the orbit of Tazat Hyla, the homeworld and capital planet of the Confederacy. The assault was more of a rout than a battle. A 4 fleet appeared to face us. At this point, I believe they've simply been renaming fleets as a sort of attempt to ruse us into thinking they have more fleets than they really did. Either that or the Tazat fleets have piss-all coordination, and can never show up all at once to face us. Anyway, the Lambeck fleet moved to face us off once we entered the capital system, the name of which I am not going to try and pronounce, because I would quite frankly butcher the name like I butchered the Tazat. The battle was set from the start. We had everything: numbers, firepower, range, speed, open space, morale, and a sense of how to actually wage war. Within the first minute, we blew 2 corvettes out of space, and a concentrated salvo from all our destroyers turned enemy armor into papier-mâché. By the time we were through them, the enemy ships looked like something you'd find in a twisted art museum. We then moved on to the station. We would have spared the poor souls, but the sensors on that station could have provided garrison forces of the capital planet with critical information, and it could have been used as a big signal jammer for our troops, so we had to clear it. We ripped apart the shields and armor, then sent in the droid marines. The Tazat were prepared. They barricaded corridors and mined all the approaches, but some hacking turned their own turrets against them, and the station was ours. Oh, quick side note, because this is hardly worth mentioning. Another Tazat fleet did sally out to meet us. We crushed it within minutes of contact. The enemy broke before we could do heavy damage, but damage was done. 2 corvettes and 1 destroyer added to the tally of Tazat kills. Considering the losses of the Tazat Navy and space station, we calculate another 23,800 lives were taken from the Tazat ranks. We, on the other hand, have identified rooms that often have high Siphont casualties from our previous engagements, and for our most recent battles, all Siphont crews in these high casualty rooms have worn protective gear such as flak and fire protection. It has reduced casualties, and I can say only 31 Siphont lives were lost. It seems that unless the Tazat dare to try us on again, my role in this war is coming to a close. All our objectives have been achieved. We have successfully blitzed our way through all opposition, and we orbit the heartland of the Confederacy. Scans of the planet confirm that this planet is the powerhouse of the Tazat Confederacy, housing 2/3 of the nation's entire population and single-handedly providing most of the alloys, consumer goods, and even scientific knowledge. It is also a thriving commercial hub that puts capitalists to shame. Seems they're doing rather well for communists. This is Acting Grand Admiral Kane Saltador. This is likely the last audio recording I will make. The invasion is underway, and my role is simply support from now on. The last thing I will cover is the initial invasion of the planet, as it is partly the responsibility of the fleet to aid the ground landing. So, for the last time, here we go. There was no pre-invasion saturation of the enemy ground forces. While there was no planetary shield, the Tazat have many smaller shields that cover their cities and military installations. Orbital bombardment would be timely and expensive, and would lead to massive infrastructure damage before any dent could be made on their military force, and there would have been inevitable civilian casualties. So we decided to land forces straight away, and get this war done with. Now, the capital planet is not exactly a fortress, and by Tazat standards it is actually only moderately defended. But Tazat ideas of moderate is much more intense than most standards. The planet is host to mountain fortresses, using the very mountains themselves as cover for artillery and long-range anti-aircraft support. Hydro dams, which are usually civilian targets, were built with weapons attached and have their own shield generators. Their factories were literally built with open slots for artillery or other weapons to be fixed to them if needed, and every suitable landing zone is covered by an array of surface-to-air defences. Landing was no picnic. Since a straight landing in the open was suicide, Colton opted for an even more frontal assault. All the army was sent down in 3 waves. The first wave was entirely droids. They landed at the foot of several fortified mountains and assaulted them, using carriers with drills mounted on the front to drill straight through the mountainside and deliver shock troops to the internal of the bases. As the mountains were assaulted, the second wave of droids landed in the open plains and took the brunt of remaining Confederate air support and artillery. As droids were entirely machines, and since the Tazat were not directly assaulting the droids, we were able to pick up the broken droid bodies and haul them back to makeshift repair bays. Without any actual Tazat forces, they couldn't stop us from simply reassembling most of the broken droids, minimizing the effectiveness of their long-range artillery. With 6 million droids on the planet, Colton quickly spread his forces across the continent. Within 3 days, half the continent was ours. There are other continents, but the capital city is the priority. While we have forces on all the continents tying down the garrisons, the majority of our forces is concentrated on only one. Right now, the ground war has been slowing as our forces approach many cities and the capital itself. All these cities are major hardpoints, and for 3 weeks now, the ground invasion has slowed to a halt. These hardpoints are too hard to handle in such a short time frame. So Colton has decided to strike the head off the Hydra and go for a decisive all-out strike on the capital. All heavy equipment, weaponry and tools are being taken from all the fronts and handed to army groups that will assault the capital. All other fronts have been ordered to dig in and wait. The Tazat should be unable to leave the safety of their shields, and all they have to do is wait for the capital to fall. And with that, I believe my little documentary is at an end. Please note, the audio I have selected to play back to any listener are only summaries of the major events. There is a total of 153 separate recordings, most of them day-to-day updates, but some are in-depth analysis of our naval encounters, and others live recordings of my command bridge during every combative encounter. Is that everything? I think it is. I feel like I need a more flashy conclusion. Well, I don't have one, so that's it, I suppose. Fucking aliens. Fucking communists. Bloody American general, too. Oh well. Might as well try this virtual assistant now. Cynthia said it should be fine, even if it is just a prototype. Just
Admiral, high priority request for orbital strike has been relayed from ground command. Request is for high saturation of all munition types in one mass bombardment. Request given straight from General Colton. Coordinates are loaded in request package.
advise ground command that this will expend enough orbit-to-ground munitions to render orbital support null for 2 weeks. He's blown through it faster than we can supply it or charge for
The
land.
request comes with a PS note. It reads, "Yes, I know. Quit blathering and fire already."
Uncouth American. Very well, lock all guns on target. Maximum firepower. Fire on Colton's command.
General, Naval Command confirms order. All guns ready.
Echo Team, this is Command. Have a Foxtrot 9er confirmed status.
Command, this is Echo. Alpha Zulu 5-5. Charges 7, my team are a safe distance. We are go. Repeat, we are go.
Boulder reactor sky high, Echo. Be advised the AO is included in the radius of orbital saturation. Take immediate cover once the shields go down.
Roger, Command, we'll go. Charges blown to good effect. Energy factory neutralized.
Naval Command, this is Ground Command. Fire!
Command confirmed. All batteries firing.
Transmit new droid directives. Take the city. General assault protocols are now active. Civilians, consider hostile if armed. Order all artillery to fire. I want to see his defenses smoldering wrecks by the time droids reach them. Hold back close air support until they do. The capital is to fall in weeks. Any longer into the Zat will slip mobile shield generators and we will get stuck in attrition.
Sir, masses of Zat forces have sallied out of the shields on the eastern front. We have no orbital support left to stop them, and defenses are too weak. The computers predict a complete breakthrough. The Zat must be hoping to draw our orbital fire away from the capital, but once they realize we've run out, they might not stop the attack.
Where in the hell did they come from? There's no way to hide a force large enough to take the eastern defenses.
They have very few tanks or artillery support, sir. They're sending infantry in the 100,000s. They could have sneaked infantry in easily, or even armed civilians. Sir, the lines are undersupplied and tank support was drained for the assault on the capital.
Then send in the eastern reserves. Stem the tide with a tide of our own.
Sir, the eastern reserves are almost entirely Eurasian volunteers. Light tank support, light mech brigades, no close-range artillery equipment at all, besides a few mortars. The reserve is practically infantry, and they're inexperienced at that.
We can't lose the eastern front or we'll be enveloped in a pincer. The reserves have to plug the gap they can to bunker down, or the Zat will just go around them. We base all reserve close air support to the east and get some broadcast towers set up over there ASAP. Then we can send them the droids to relieve the Eurasians.
Sir, a massed infantry battle is too chaotic and uncertain. The east is mostly open plains. Infantry are lambs to the slaughter.
I know that, dang gunnet. They'll have to push on faster we take our defensive positions, then they'll have to do whatever they can to dig in. Foxholes, sandbags, wrecked tanks, hell, I don't care if they dig trenches or stack bodies for cover. Hell with that, I ordered them to dig trenches. It's the best armor infantry can wish for. We'll ship them emergency equipment, anti-tank guns, LMGs, and rockets. That should give us long enough to keep all our forces here invested in this attack.
Sir, what do I tell them? Sacrifice thousands to retake what we lost, then dig in? Expect minimal support against waves of Zat until we either come relieve them or the fleet gets resupplied?
In a roundabout way that doesn't sound like they're just being thrown under the bus. Let's just get the point across that they're in for a long 2 weeks. Once the Zat realize we blown our orbital support, they'll send out the heavy stuff. Tanks, mechs, close air support, the whole shebang, and it'll be coming right down on top of them with nothing but bodies and trenches to hold it back.
So infantry and trenches are gonna hold the line against walls of mechanized infantry and tanks with no artillery, orbital, or air support. The casualty projections are enormous just to retake the line, let alone holding it.
Such is war, gentlemen. If the eastern blink falls, we'll have to abandon our attack on the capital, and if we call it off now, then we have wasted a month's planning and orbital support for none.
But calling off the attack now before it's truly begun means we can cleanly disengage with no losses and send the tanks back to help the reserve troops. They were under-equipped before we called away all their tanks and air support, and now they've got nothing left. The east can be retaken, and we can build more broadcast towers to support a greater droid presence there. The defenses can be shored up and—
By then, the Zat have put up another shield and rebuilt their own defenses that we just spent all our orbital ammo smashing, delaying our progress 2 whole months, which would mean shipping in more supplies to build enough generators to power our droids and giving the Zat time for our blockade runners to slip past the fleet and bomb our exposed troops. We don't have shields, son. All it takes is a few ships to reduce half of us to ash.